Welcome to Pioneer Mindset, a place where we challenge our mindset and address the discomfort in both business and life by finding clarity resulting in bold conviction. I'm your host, Garrett Ruskamp, fifth-generation farmer, husband, and father from rural Nebraska. Whether you're navigating frustration from past decisions or worry about the uncertainty you face today in your business, we're going to learn from our struggles and take on new challenges with a resilient mindset. Join me as I share my journey of struggles I've faced in agriculture as a farmer and family man. I'm ready to dive into honest conversations to tackle the mindsets surrounding key issues that rural ag business owners face that will ultimately help you gain control, leading to a profitable and sustainable business. Let's adapt to Pioneer Mindset and get to it.
Welcome back, everyone, to this week's episode of Pioneer Mindset. Are you treating your cost of money like every other input cost on your farm? Should you tell your banker you're shopping around? So this is what we're going to be diving into today, is kind of talking about, should we actually tell our banker that we're shopping around? And what does that look like for our operation? Most aren't willing to step outside of their comfort zones, even though that's where the opportunity lies. All right, so this might be the case that you can use that phrase for literally anything. A lot of times the opportunity is right outside of your comfort zone, right outside of that line that we don't want to cross, right outside of that conversation that we don't want to have. And so kind of going back to, are you treating your cost of money like every other input cost on your farm? Are you willing to shop around for your interest, for your cost of money? Are you willing to tell your banker that you're looking for a better cost of money? This comes up for me because we kind of had a personal experience here, because within our own operation, we're doing just that. And so I want to kind of dive into a little bit about that, share my own personal context, what we're going through and how it's relevant to this conversation, and ultimately the outcome of what it led to. And so basically, I told my banker that we're shopping around, and I want to tell you kind of what his response was, and we'll kind of dive into that. So kind of to give you some context, I'm going to tell you as much as I can. It's not all said and done. It's not set in stone yet at the time of this recording. And I'm not going to necessarily sugarcoat the numbers, because it is what it is. Judge me if you want. That's not what this is about. This is about talking through the conversation of, what does this actually look like? And how can this even be a benefit for you in the future as well, right? So shopping around with banks, that's exactly what we're trying to go through, because we're trying to facilitate a real estate deal, a land deal. And so we are trying to basically buy some parcels, some acres, and the total project, just to kind of give you some context on the number that we're talking about here, the total amount is going to be about $2 million of financing that we're seeking. So a pretty good chunk of change. We're trying to go through some multiple different avenues. We're trying to be creative with the financing options that are out there. We're not just necessarily trying to take what we can. I'll dive into that here in a second. But with this land deal, I was talking with the bank about it. He's been well aware of it for the last couple of years that this might be coming down the line. I said, hey, I'm not going to necessarily disclose the bank that we're working with, but I will tell you that when it comes to the other banks that we were trying to use, maybe shop around. So I was going to be going through the FSA for maybe a portion of the financing, and then was actually even looking at Farm Credit, right? So looking at some of those different banks that seem like they typically have a better interest rate, right? In our area anyways, those are probably the most competitive. And so especially Farm Credit, they're very competitive. And so, yeah, I went ahead and I started having some conversations. And the hard part was, so our banker, well aware that this was going on. He's got our operating note. He's got some other debt that we have. So he knows our operation in or out. And so that was the thing that I had a hard time with. Like most probably would, is, okay, I want to do my best to get a cheaper interest rate, but I also don't want to damage this relationship with our banker, right? I don't want to potentially cause some friction there, maybe potentially cause some resentment even. The Ruskamps, they're not willing to stick around with us. They're going to look for something else, something better, right? And so I didn't want that. And so that was ultimately the stories that was going through my head, in the back of my mind, that maybe kept me a little bit stuck, or maybe even had some resistance around, should we even go talk to these other banks, these other loan officers out there? Should we even look at this move? Should we even consider this, right? That resistance is real. And I think we face that all too often. And I definitely did in this scenario as well. And so it even kind of comes down to sometimes, okay, back to this initial question of, should we tell our bankers that we're shopping around? So we might be willing to actually do the work, do the due diligence to shop around and kind of see what else is out there, but not actually willing to tell our banker that we're doing that. And so I'll get to that here in a second. But I would say it's very common for this situation because, when we're talking $2 million that we're trying to get financing for, you're talking a big annual payment, stretching this out over 30, 40 years, depends on where you're getting financing from. And so any little bit of interest savings is real dollars back to your bank account, back to your family. And so back to your operation, that is going to be extremely important. And so that's what I was thinking about in this entire process is I just wanted to do my due diligence. I just wanted to shop around, just like any other input, see what else is out there. And part of it's also just kind of keeping the banker honest, keeping the bank, not necessarily even the banker, but the bank itself. Hey, if this is all they're willing to give me, can I get a little bit better interest rate somewhere else? And is that even worth it? I didn't want to tell him that we were shopping around because I just didn't know what he was going to say. I didn't want him to feel that pressure to some extent. I didn't want to be a burden on him. I didn't want to damage that relationship any bit because at the end of the day, I do think there's a lot of value in relationships. I'll build upon that a little bit more too. But especially when it comes to the cost of money, I feel like that's where people get hung up all the time is because they don't want to damage that relationship because that's so very critical, right? And furthermore, back to one things that farmers have a hard time with, and myself included, is sometimes we don't think that we can get a better interest rate, a better cost of money. We don't think that we can even get better. If they lay out the terms and conditions, or if you ask them, we call up the banker like, hey, this is what I want to do. What can I get? And they spit a number back out at you. You're like, okay, I guess that's as good as it's going to get. Take it or leave it, basically, right? And because most of the time we don't want to go through the hassle of either switching banks or we don't want to go through the hassle of shopping around, getting to go know a new person, a new institution, and it just causes ripples in our day, right? Ripples in our routine, right outside that comfort zone, like I said. So we're just willing to just kind of stay put, stay where we're at. And I had that same thought going through this process. I had that same thought that I don't necessarily want to mess around with switching to somebody else. I want to, in this situation, I was going to look at using FSA and a different bank and a different farm creditor. I'm going back to that farm ownership loan. If most of you guys are probably familiar with that, they've got a 50-50 joint financing option out there. So you go through the FSA for one portion and then you go through another creditor, I should say, for the other portion. Right. So like in this case, I'm like, well, I could just stick with our bank. Then it just keeps it easy. I'm already dealing with our banker. He knows us. He knows our operation. And then I don't have to get to know a new banker. That was definitely going through my head. And so I feel like that thought process is so very common. And even that mindset about just farmers just not willing to think that they can get any better. And then to build upon that, just one last thought here kind of on our specific situation, just to kind of explain a little bit more context is I told you I did my due diligence. So I called some other banks. I called Farm Credit and they did have a better interest rate than our local bank. And so I was doing the math, running the numbers and trying to figure out, okay, what's this going to save me if I'm able to do this? And then that's typically how, most of us make decisions. We got to put a dollar amount on this and see once if we're willing to go through something that's uncomfortable in order to capture that value, in order to capture that dollar amount. And so same thing for me. Trying to put a dollar amount on the savings that would be there from an interest standpoint, the cost of money standpoint, and seeing if that's going to be able to outweigh maybe having these uncomfortable conversations with the banker, telling them that I'm going elsewhere or pulling these accounts elsewhere or having to manage another relationship with a new banker and give them all our information because they don't have it already and all that other stuff, right? So that's literally what runs through our heads. So we had to put that dollar amount out there. And so I came up with that dollar amount. And just for context, once again, in this situation with this dollar amount that we're talking about, it was like $6,000 or $7,000 annual savings a year. And so I thought that was real money. And even in the end, I still had resistance with that. And I was talking with another friend, kind of a guy that I've been kind of acquaintance with, talking with him and kind of sharing my thoughts and sharing this different perspective here, sharing the values, the dollar amount savings. And he's like, at the end of the day, that's real savings back to your bank account. And your banker should want you to take advantage of that. And he's actually a banker himself. So I thought that was pretty powerful coming from that. And even in this situation, furthermore, we're talking a real estate deal. That's a little bit different than, say, your typical line of credit, your annual financing. This is sometimes real estate deals are just more of kind of a one-time, like, hey, set it in place. And so maybe it's a little bit more flexible going and taking this elsewhere. And so that's something to really kind of keep in mind as well. But getting back to this, he's just like, hey, you've got to take into consideration that that's real dollars back to your bank account. And sometimes, like I said, even I forget about that oftentimes, right? And so wanted to ask you, think about this, why do you think farmers don't shop around? what kind of comes up for you? If you think about in the past, have you been willing to shop around to different banks, or have you been pretty resistant to that? Has that even crossed your mind? Just want to kind of bring that up as far as, I've got to ask the question, okay, why don't farmers actually shop around? The big kind of elephant in the room is literally it's just uncomfortable. Maybe it's awkward trying to build that relationship with a new banker. Maybe it's awkward because you don't want your other banker to find out, your current banker, right? Maybe it just feel like your current banker might get mad, or maybe they'll take it personally. The big one right at the end here, when this is one that I was kind of having hiccups with, is maybe there's going to be repercussions. Maybe there's going to be consequences if they find out that you're shopping around. That was literally one of the things that went through my head was, okay, if we've got pretty good deal right now, maybe really good relationships, he's always been favorable to us, or maybe if we tell him we shop around and we take this loan elsewhere in the future, if we get into a bind, he's not going to be willing to work with us. It's not going to be the same. We're damaging this relationship, yada, yada. And that was some very real stories and thoughts going through my head. And the big one there is also just don't want the hassle. Don't want the hassle of trying to gather up our information and send it to a different banker to try to figure out what they can do for us, right? And so that's the big one there, is just don't want the hassle. And it's easy. What we currently have is typically easy, right? It's comfortable. Even if it's not necessarily best going to suit you, it's still comfortable. So I think that's kind of a further upon just not wanting to go outside of our comfort zone and not wanting to go through the hassle of actually switching banks or even shopping around. We're just even talking about shopping around, not necessarily even talking about fully switching yet. And then the next one here is another reason why we don't necessarily want to shop around is we probably feel powerless to the banks. Anybody feel that in the past before? I know I definitely have. Typically, it's maybe in times when we feel like our financial situation is not as good as it should be, or not as good as it could be, or maybe we feel heavily responsible for our current financial situation. Maybe we're just not in a good position. We feel powerless to the bank and the banking institutions in general, right? But maybe even the bank that we're currently working with. So we feel like if we question that, or if we go elsewhere, we feel like we're just going to be able to take what they have. And we don't feel like we actually have any control or any say in those conversations. And that's a big one there, because when it comes back to the control within those conversations, I always reference this because it's so very real for me. I think back to most of the time when I was going into our banker's office before we even switched banks, kind of our old banker, ex-banker, if you will. Every time we'd go into the banker's office, at that time we were not in a great financial position. And so every time I'd go in there, I'd sit in the chair and you'd sit there and you'd just try to explain yourself. And it literally felt like you were in the principal's office. Remember going into the principal's office as a kid, you sit in there and try to be all quiet, or nervous about what they're going to say, or, are you going to be in trouble, or is he going to give you detention, or, what's going to actually happen? You do not know the outcome. That fear of and that lack of control can be really overwhelming and really consuming as well. And that was definitely the case for me. And that's probably the case for most people as well. Even if you're in a decent position, you just still never truly know what the banker's always going to say. You feel like they're ultimately the ones that have the final say and they have all the control. So we feel powerless to the bank, and we feel powerless to all banks even too. Because, for our operations, for most family farming operations, we need capital, we need cash to operate. We don't always have enough. We have shortfalls. That's just the way our production cycle works. And so, especially even like a real estate deal, can't go buy this if I don't have capital, if I don't have the money, the financing to do it, right? So we ultimately feel powerless. And so that's just a kind of another reason why we don't actually be willing to shop around. All right. And so kind of another thought process here is, the farmers that typically just have the mindset of take what we can get. And so I was actually talking with somebody else a while back, and this was on something kind of unrelated, but he made the comment, he's like, yeah, farmers pretty much have the mentality of take what we can get. And I'm like, yeah, that's so true. That's so true, because I'm the same way. Most of the times it's like, okay, take what we can get. If all we can get is X, this interest rate, yeah, I'm just going to take it, right? Not going to argue, not going to fight it, not trying to do better. Within that mindset of take what you can get, we usually stop short of what's actually possible. That's kind of the big reframe here as we get into this next segment of this, talking about how we do actually reframe our mindset, pioneer mindset, trying to kind of get a mindset that's going to ultimately serve us. And so I think that's the big one there, is we stop short of what's actually possible when we only just take what we can get, when we only just take whatever our local bank has and that's good enough. What's actually possible? What's actually out there? If all we ever do is take the first thing that comes to us, or the first person or the only person that we're dealing with, whether it be in equipment, whether it be chemicals, seed, all these other things. We shop all those things. If all we ever do is take the first thing, are we truly really protecting ourselves, protecting our operation, protecting our business? No. And so that's kind of why as we get into the reframe here, as we talk about trying to reframe our mindset and how we look at this a little bit differently, trying to get to where we can step outside of our comfort zone. And so that way we don't stop short of what's actually possible. So the reframe here is just talking about interest and treating it as a cost of money. And interest is literally just a cost of money. Every time you borrow money, there's a cost to that, right? And that's what we call interest. And by the way, interest is deductible. And the reason I put that on there is most people know that. Most people know that interest is deductible. You can deduct that from your taxes. But I put that on there because since it is deductible, let's flip our mindset in that it's just like any other input. Interest is just like any other input because it is deductible. It's just like seed, just like fertilizer, parts, fuel, all those other things that we typically shop around. Instead of stopping at this gas station, we go, 3 or 4 blocks down the road or even a town over to get better gas or to get better fuel. Or maybe instead of using brand X, we use brand B because they're a little bit cheaper and kind of the same apples to apples, all those other things that go through our mind when we're shopping around. And so that's why it's extremely important for us to kind of reframe that mindset that interest is just like any other input. And so we need to be diligent about how we're actually thinking about this. So once again, we shop seed, we shop equipment, fertilizer, parts, all those things. We will definitely go to, a different fertilizer if it's going to save us a little bit of money. It's the same way with interest. Why not really keep that mindset around shopping inputs, as in your interest? Why don't we keep that in financing? Why don't we keep that mindset around financing? I get it, we can't shop financing because let's face it, if we don't have the financing, if we don't have the operating note, if we don't have the real estate note, we can't shop around for the equipment and the parts and the fertilizer. We can't spend hours every single night shopping around for the best deal on Facebook Marketplace. We can't do those things if we don't have a business that's funded by the bank, if we don't have the capital to do all those things. So I get it. There's plenty of reasons and benefits to keep a good relationship with your banker. I'm not saying we need to just completely throw that out the window and we literally just go to the cheapest interest rate. But at the end of the day, asking ourselves, are we being willing to step outside of that comfort zone and shop around? All right. I didn't say we keep completely flip script every 6 months because somebody else is better out there, right? I'm just saying, are we willing to do what it takes? By the way, this is kind of the thought process that comes up is, are you not being a good business owner if you are not actually looking after your business? So once again, we're trying to protect our business here. So you would say that you're being a good farmer, a good business owner, a good ag business owner if you are shopping around for better seed prices, better equipment prices. If you're pricing all these different things, you would classify yourself as a good business owner. Why are we not doing the same with financing, right? If your banker really has your best interest in mind, he should want you to be a good business owner. He should want you to do your due diligence to see what's out there, to see what's actually possible, to see what's right outside that comfort zone, to see what opportunities lie ahead. And so that's the reframe here. And here's the hard truth. Out of everything that I talk about today, here's what I want you to kind of think about and really take home. This is kind of a hard truth. I'm not trying to knock bankers. I'm not trying to knock them. But here's the hard truth. Your banker is a salesman. The bank sells loans. The bank only makes money if they sell loans. Once again, I'm not trying to knock the bankers out there. I know a lot of really good bankers that do a really great job. But I'm just saying, having this mindset flip, this reframe as a farmer, as a business owner, can be what ultimately protects your operation, helps bring those opportunities, bring that cash flow back to your operation if it's actually possible for you. And so I'm going to actually restate that because there's a lot of truth in what we just said there. Your banker is a salesman. The bank sells loans. The bank only makes money if they sell loans. It's just like the equipment dealer down the road that sold that $500,000 tractor. It's just like that seed dealer that sold the $100,000 worth of seed. It's the same thing, right? So your banker is a salesman and they sell loans. That's what they sell. So I say that because as we get into kind of what actually happened to our situation, what actually happened with our bank, right? I say that because that helps us reframe. Okay, I don't need to be worrying about Joe's reaction if I want to go shop around, right? I don't need to be worried about that because that's what they're in. They're in the business of selling stuff. Treat it like that. Treat it exactly like that. Treat it like a retail seller. And so be willing to have those hard conversations because you'd be surprised what they can actually do. Back to we only take what we can get. is you'd be surprised what they can actually do. If they're a salesman, they might actually be willing to change some things. They might be actually willing to make sure that they get that deal from you, that they sell that loan to you. Now, that's the reframe. When I talk about the banker selling the loan to you, that's the reframe. Because now all of a sudden it puts that power back into your hands. We're accepting this loan, and I'm not trying to downplay the debt and everything we're talking about there, but we got to realize this is a two-way relationship. And so back to feeling powerless to the bank, that's where we put that back into our control is, the banker that we're currently working with, they don't make money if they don't sell loans. And if they don't sell that loan to you, they're not going to make money off of you. I mean, that's just the reality of it, right? So put that power back into your hands, realize that you do have that power, and you can take advantage of that. So now, back to our situation, back to the conversation that I had with our banker. Did I tell my banker that we're shopping around? Did he cave? Did he stand his ground? Did I piss him off? What actually happened? For me, just the way that my core values are is I'm a very honest person at heart. I try to do the best that I can to be honest. And I think honesty, there's times we can get burned with honesty. But in general, I think being an honest person is always going to pay you back in dividends. And so that's what I did. I guess I told him, I said, hey, by the way, and he flat out told me, he said, I will do everything that I can to keep this and to keep you from going to Farm Credit. And I said, well, I'm just going to be honest. Like, I'm just pricing around, seeing what else they have out there, seeing what they can do. I'm just looking around and going to see what I can get for an interest rate, see if that's going to be competitive. And I told him that. And I said, I'm going to do what I can to just kind of protect ourselves. And that's where, once again, if you have a good banker, they should be completely understanding of that. They should not take that personally. They should not take offense to that. And that should not cause repercussions. And therefore, with this banker, with our current local banker that we're working with, we built this good relationship with him. He came back and he actually had a better interest rate. So that's the outcome, is he came back with a better deal. So, I told him, hey, I'm shopping around, and he understood. He said, okay. He went to work. Yeah. So when it comes to the banker, I said they're a salesman, right? And that's exactly what they are. They're selling loans for the bank. So it's kind of like the equipment dealer. When you're talking with your equipment salesman, they ultimately probably don't necessarily set the price. They might be able to kind of come in there and maybe negotiate something, but they're the middleman, right? They're the middleman that's maybe doing the paperwork, that filing the liens and the titles and all that other fun stuff, just like the equipment salesman. But it's ultimately the owner of that business, whether it be equipment dealer itself or the manufacturer, or in this case, the banks themselves, the institutions, they're the ones that are actually in charge. So what he did is he did his homework. He went back and he came up with a better deal. He was able to strike up a better deal. It's just interesting. It was really eye-opening for me because okay, hey, there is opportunities out there right outside of that comfort zone, right beyond, I should say, of taking what we can get. And so those are also real dollars back to our bank accounts. Okay, he was able to come back with an interest rate that was very competitive compared to Farm Credit. That was ultimately, what led us to probably continuing to work with him, and he's going to get this deal. And so he did his homework. He did what he could. He did his due diligence, just like I did mine. That's ultimately the outcome of this scenario and this story. I say this because it provides light for you, all right? You too as well. So I want to ask you, are you leaving money on the table because you didn't want an uncomfortable conversation? I'm just asking it. Is that true for you? Part of being a good farm business owner is getting your financial info organized so that shopping around or even switching is not only an option, but an opportunity you're willing and able to jump on. That's exactly what good business owners do, is they have those opportunities capable and they're willing to take advantage of them. They have that information put together, so they have those opportunities right in front of them and they're willing to take advantage of them. So if even thinking about shopping around gives you anxiety or just really overwhelms you, or just sometimes just brings this fear upon you that you don't even think is possible. Once again, you just feel like you're just kind of settled for what's comfortable, for what you can get, but you want to take advantage of those opportunities. You want to be that person. You want to be that good business owner that's willing to put money back into your account, back into your family's bank account, right? Back into your operation, to your legacy. Well, the good news is there's opportunities out there for you. And that's exactly what I help farmers and ranchers do inside Pioneer Farmer, is helping them get all their financial information put together and making it easy for them. And so if you want to take back that control, if you want to get a better interest rate, take advantage of opportunities and put that money back into your pocket and protect your legacy, by all means, let's have a chat. Let's just talk about what opportunities are available for you, what that looks like for you. Maybe this isn't very overwhelming. Maybe this is something we can just put a few little action steps in place, make it so that way we can reframe our mindset around the cost of money and actually be willing to have these uncomfortable conversations. So let's chat. You can hit me up at pioneerfarmer.org is our website. And then you can also send me an email. You can find our email on there. Contact information is on there as well. Yeah, I'd be happy to chat with you about this. But otherwise, for now, that's all I got for this week's episode as we talk about, are you willing to shop around? Are you willing to shop around for your interest rate and treat your cost of money like every other input? We will catch you guys next time, and stay safe out there, guys.
Thanks for tagging along with me today as we sharpened our mindsets. If you've gained insight from today's episode, be sure to take a screenshot to share or send this episode to somebody who might also find value in it. For more, follow me on Instagram at @GarrettRuskamp or on Facebook, and join me next time for more conviction through clarity.